It's Monday, September 14. Good afternoon. I'm Herman Green with your midday news. For those of you watching online at onespotmedia.com, a very special welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. 2 more COVID-19 related deaths were recorded within the last 24 hours, pushing the country's death toll from the contagious respiratory illness to 44. The latest victims are a 76-year-old man from Kingston and St. Andrew and a 73-year-old man from St. Catherine. The Ministry of Health says both had comorbidities. Meanwhile, the country's coronavirus case count now stands at 3,933. 162 cases of the coronavirus were recorded within the last 24 hours. The latest statistics provided by the Ministry of Health and Wellness show that there are 7 critically ill patients. Another 28 persons are moderately ill. A breakdown of the ministry's latest figures indicated that St. Catherine and Kingston and St. Andrew recorded the most cases of the coronavirus. St. Catherine had 74 cases, while Kingston and St. Andrew recorded 51. The parish of Manchester recorded 11 cases, Portland 7, and St. Thomas 6. The remaining new cases recorded were in Clarendon 5, St. Anne 3, St. Elizabeth and St. James 2 each, and St. Mary 1. There was no new COVID-19 case recorded for Trelawney, Hanover, and Westmoreland. And the World Health Organization, WHO, reported a record one-day increase in global coronavirus cases yesterday. There were 307,930 new cases in 24 hours. According to the agency's website, the greatest increases were in India, the United States, and Brazil. The number of deaths rose by 5,537 for a total of 917,417. India reported 94,372 new cases, followed by the United States with 45,523 new infections, and Brazil with 43,718. Both the United States and India each reported over 1,000 new deaths, and Brazil reported 874 lives lost in the past 24 hours. The previous WHO record for new cases was 306,857 on September 6. The agency reported a record 12,430 deaths on April 17. India leads the world in new cases reported each day and set a global record last week with 97,570 cases reported in a single day. In other news now, an explanation this afternoon from Prime Minister Andrew Holness about his thought process in selecting his cabinet. This amidst criticisms, including on social media, about some of his selections. Mr. Holness addressed the matter at the swearing-in ceremony for cabinet ministers on Sunday afternoon.
The challenge, of course, is that the people who are elected are not always subject experts. So what then is the essence of a minister? Is it competence in a subject area? Or is it good judgment to administer the affairs of the public, to be able to filter good advice from bad advice?
Meanwhile, a member of the National Democratic Movement, NDM, Michael Williams, has reacted to the announcement of the government's cabinet. Mr. Williams believes that some persons should not have been appointed to the cabinet. Now, speaking on TVJ's Smile Jamaica this morning, Mr. Williams said the 19-member cabinet is a stretch. On Friday, Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced his full cabinet with a few changes from the one that was in place before the September 3 general election. The 19-member cabinet, with 9 state ministers, will make up the executive of the government.
Auburn Hill does not need to be in the cabinet to manage water. And that's the first one that I would like to object to, because I've heard Auburn Hill's comments about what he would like to do with water, and that is not going to go down well with the country. There's no need for Matthew Samuda to be a minister if he's going to be a full minister in national security. Already you have Horace Chang as a full minister there.
Mr. Williams also raised concerns about the appointment of Daryl Vaz to the Ministry of Science and Technology, given the numerous scandals that surrounded the state-owned oil company, which falls under that ministry. He believes Mr. Vaz should have been selected as the government's go-to person to resolve issues.
You're saying he should not be put in that position?
Absolutely not.
Is there a ministry that you think he should have been placed?
Mr. Vaz?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vaz has always been a troubleshooter and he does a very good job as a troubleshooter. He goes where there are issues and he tends to solve them and solve them quickly. So he could continue in that role.
The cabinet ministers, with the exception of the 4 that were previously appointed, were sworn in at King's House on Sunday afternoon. The state ministers will be sworn in today at 3 p.m. In the meantime, University lecturer Damian Gordon says the new cabinet will have to navigate an unprecedented period of difficulty. He says education, national security, and the economy must be priority areas.
There are a myriad of challenges, and the challenges are diverse. So the pressing issues clearly the economy, the education sector. There are a lot of uncertainties surrounding the education sector in light of the COVID-related developments. There are a lot of anxieties where that is concerned. So that is a very urgent and pressing issue. Security, obviously, we still have not been able to tame the crime monster. Certainly, people are expecting a different approach to crime fighting than the approach which has been used over the last 4 years.
And Mr. Gordon says the public will be holding the cabinet members to a very high standard.
I think that in terms of public expectations, the public is expecting a high level of performance and accountability and transparency from the new cabinet. And I think that this time around, the populace will be very impatient about results. So all the cabinet ministers as a collective have to deliver and have to meet the expectations of the Jamaicans who voted for them overwhelmingly, which was a strong show of confidence in Andrew Holness and the Jamaica Labour Party by extension.
And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, continuing the news. Justice could be swifter with the implementation of increased technology in the island's courts. This as persons who would go to court for sentencing and trials will not necessarily need to stand directly before a judge. The details in this report.
Come next year, there will be a greater use of technology in Jamaica's judicial system. This will allow for greater speed in the ruling of some cases and the transporting of prisoners to court for their scheduled hearings. It's the focus of Chief Justice Brian Sykes. But the Chief Justice says while that is all good, the issue of internet penetration across the country is poor. It's something which he says has not gone unnoticed.
We must still remember that there are persons who are self-represented litigants and persons who, for whatever reason, may choose not to engage in or participate in the process electronically. So we still have to find ways and means of accommodating those persons, since we do not want the transition to the digital era to become one of exclusion, but really we should see it as a means of improving access to justice, not just for the litigants, but also for the attorneys.
He says the digitization of the judicial system was unavoidable due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Things that we have been debating for weeks and months and years, suddenly within days, not weeks, we all made the change, and all for the good.
As for bail hearings, Mr. Sykes said the judges have been carrying out that function through video conferencing. That technology is to be expanded as more police stations are being retrofitted to facilitate the technology.
Bail applications are still being done, certainly in the Supreme Court. The police have established the Kingston Central, Halfway Tree, and Montego Bay Freeport, and they are currently working on all their main stations in the divisions, so that in all of those main stations in the next few months we'll be able to have bail applications in the parish courts remotely.
The Chief Justice is also reporting a major decrease in the backlog of cases in the courts. He noted that 83% of criminal cases in parish courts have been cleared up. In relation to the gun court, Mr. Sykes says the backlog in that court should be cleared up by June 2021.
We also need to recognize the significant increase in output from the Court of Appeal with the 3 judges that have been added there. And so what the data is telling us for the year 2019 is that of the 191 matters that were dealt with, 63.35% disposed of on the same day, another 25% within the same week.
The Chief Justice was speaking at yesterday's annual Assize service held at the Webster Memorial United Church in St. Andrew to mark the start of the Michaelmas term of the Home Circuit Court. Prince Moore, TVJ News.
And the magisterial recount for the Clarendon Northwestern constituency is to get underway in the Clarendon Parish Court tomorrow at 10 o'clock. The People's National Party last Friday applied for the recount due to 1,107 ballots in the constituency being rejected. Its candidate, Richard Azan, lost the seat to the Jamaica Labour Party's Philip Henriquez by 83 votes. PNP General Secretary Julian Robinson says the party's team of attorneys are prepared to defend the rights of Mr. Azan. Now, Councillor for the Montego Bay North Division in St. James, Leroy Williams, has been appointed the new Mayor of Montego Bay and Chairman of the St. James Municipal Corporation. His appointment follows the resignation of former Mayor Homer Davis, who was elected Member of Parliament for St. James Southern in the September 3 general election. Mr. Williams was yesterday appointed during a special sitting of the corporation at the Montego Bay Cultural Centre in Sam Sharp Square. Mr. Williams previously served as Deputy Mayor at the Montego Bay Municipal Corporation. Councillor for the Montego Bay South Division, Richard Vernon, was yesterday elected Deputy Mayor. We go on to news overseas. Tropical Depression number 20 has strengthened in the Central Atlantic to become Tropical Storm Teddy. It's the 19th named storm for the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. Teddy is forecast to strengthen slowly and become a strong Category 3 hurricane. It's expected to remain at sea and at the moment poses no threat to land. Teddy is joined by Hurricane Paulette, which was located over Bermuda Monday morning, with the entire island inside the eye of the storm at one point. That's according to the National Hurricane Center, which said an island-wide power outage affected more than 20,000 customers. Meanwhile, Tropical Storm Sally is expected to make landfall Tuesday morning near New Orleans, possibly as a Category 2 hurricane. As of Sunday evening, Sally was gaining strength across the Gulf of Mexico. And still overseas, the death toll is rising in the devastating fires on the west coast of the United States. Nearly 100 fires have burned more than 4.5 million acres across California, Oregon, and Washington state. The details from the CNN.
Firefighters are grappling with deadly wildfires across the West.
We went for more than 50 hours straight, no sleep, just going from fire to fire to fire.
Searches are ongoing for dozens of people missing in California, Oregon, and Washington. More than 24 fires are burning in California alone.
It gives you a feeling of helplessness, and you don't know who to turn to or where to go and what to take from the home.
Residents forced to flee their homes, many on a moment's notice. Thousands of structures have been destroyed since mid-August.
It is also important, if you have this evacuation warnings, to be ready to go in case the fire and the wind takes a fire in a different direction, affecting your homes.
Officials hope improved weather conditions over the next few days could help.
Our biggest challenge now is fatigue and safety of the firefighters that have been out there since the beginning.
But for those who've already lost everything,
I cried for a long time.
It will be too little, too late.
We were married 41 years. Everything we owned is gone.
We go on to news in sports. With high schools being closed until October 5 due to a spike in COVID-19 cases, ISSA announced the cancellation of all their events for the remainder of 2020. But athletes, while understanding the severity of the pandemic, are yearning for competition. Trishana McGowan has a story.
Coaches and managers have spoken about their disappointment with the cancellation of ISSA's competitions for this season. However, student athletes weighed in on the impact being out of school and not being able to participate in their beloved sporting events.
I feel sad that there is no training. It is very unfortunate that this pandemic is causing so much interruption in our everyday life. In regards to being out of school, it is hard because not all my peers have access to virtual learning. I personally feel isolated.
Having heard that the commencement of the schoolboy football season has been deferred, I was a bit saddened. However, I understood why that decision was taken by the governing body ISA, as I am indeed knowledgeable of how detrimental the virus can be.
Not being able to go to school has been really a challenge, but the main challenge is to be adapting to what is going on in and around the world, which is out of our control. But my main focus now is not to be complacent, but to be disciplined to my physical and mental well-being. To be informed that this schoolboy football of 2020 has been postponed, it has been a shock to me, but I guess it's the best for our health.
But the student athletes are optimistic that some sense of normalcy will be restored in the second term.
I'm hoping that by in the Easter term, the corona cases will be properly handled in the island, and that will allow ISA to be able to organize a football competition or even a festival, which will allow players to showcase their talents, especially the persons who are on their final year and are seeking scholarships.
I want high school sports to continue where it left off, but with new safety guidelines in place to keep our athletes safe. And I would love for high school sports to reopen in January.
In a statement released by ISA on August 24, President Keith Wellington said the organization is hoping to salvage some competitions and reschedule them between January and June of next year. The release also stated that the format and schedule for their Manning and the Costa Cup football competitions will be assessed. Trishana McGowan, TVJ Sports.
And that's it for the Midday News. I'm Herman Green. Please join us at 7 for the Primetime Package. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, good afternoon.